Welcome everybody to this Climate for Growth online debate. I welcome you all that are following us on internet, on the website of Climate for Growth. Those also following us on the Twitter account. I'm welcoming our two guests today that I will introduce in a few seconds. My name is Denis Bonvillain. I'm the coordinator of the Climate for Growth campaign, and today I will moderate that session. So before introducing our speakers, let me quickly run through the program of this online debate. I will first ask our two speakers to make some introductory remarks. Then there will be an exchange between the two of them. And of course, don't hesitate, for those who are following us on Twitter, to send us questions that I will then directly direct to our speakers. So without any further delay, I would like to welcome our two guests of today. So on my left, Artur Runge-Metzger from the European Commission. And more precisely, he's working at DG Climate Action, where he is heading the International and Climate Strategy Services. On my right, Mr. Tomasz Chruszczow, who works for the Polish government, and more precisely, who's the special envoy for climate change in the frame of the COP19 Presidency. You two know each other very well. You've been negotiating and in regular contacts since a long time already. So without any further delay, I would like to give the floor to our speakers to start this online debate. So Tomasz, please, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much, Denis, and hello everybody. Well, the topic of our debate today is understanding the outcome of COP19 CMP9 in Warsaw. It might seem quite easy to understand what has happened in Warsaw just after reading the decisions, but it might be also interesting to understand how we came to this decision, what really happened in the negotiations, how parties to the convention, all countries of the world, worked to conclude in a way they were able to conclude. So, but let me list from the very beginning which are the most important elements of Warsaw outcome. Of course, first is the decision that sets the scene and sets the plan how we want to get to the new agreement in Warsaw, in Paris. It is very important to understand that from the very beginning of preparations of COP19, Poland, France, and with Peru, who joined a few months later last year, after the regional group decided that this year's conference will take place in Lima, we worked together as trio of presidencies, just having in mind they need to coordinate and they need to understand that Paris, that new global agreement, is the joint responsibility of all, with special responsibility that was laid on the shoulders of the three presidencies. So we started last year and we continue to work together. Well, this year is the term of the presidency of Polish Secretary of State, Mr. Marcin Korolec. He is the president of the COP. And we do our best to assist preparations for the Lima COP and also do our best to make sure that these preparations are very well fit to the required outcome of Paris conference in 2015. But let's come back to the outcome of Warsaw. Just to quickly list the issues, we managed to do two very important things in Warsaw. First, we managed to restore this, what we call trust between the parties. This job is not finalized yet, but at least all countries of the world have this feeling that they are respected and that all the views they present are equally treated, are equally well listened, equally well taken into consideration, and in the final outcome, everybody can find his or her own contribution. That's very important for making sure that it is truly global ownership and truly global participation in decision making. And this process of conversation between the countries, how to take decisions in this process, will continue this year. For the first time, the representatives of business and of cities and subnational governments have been invited to the COP, not just as the observers, but also as the partners of the discussion. They've been invited to the round table with the ministers. They had special sessions with the participation of the UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon. And we do continue conversation with them as we feel that both businesses, cities and subnational governments will have special role in delivering solutions, helping to solve climate issue in the coming years, especially pre-2020. What else? Very important package, what we call for Warsaw Framework for RED+. This is the set of decisions that should help to prevent deforestation, which offer not only declaration, but also concrete financial provisions and also the methodologies helping to manage the problem. Loss and damage, Warsaw mechanism, international mechanism on loss and damage, something that especially after the typhoon, the super typhoon in Philippines, appeared to be very important element of discussion and element of the decision in Warsaw. We have acknowledged that some weather extremes, some so-called slow onset events, which are slow and avoidable changes in environment that are resulting from climate change, are happening because human activity has been disturbing global climate. Finally, financial decisions, those on GCF and the decision to save the Future of Adaptation Fund with 100 million pledges to support this fund made the picture. Of course, Warsaw will need to be remembered as the very successful COP, but there are still some unfinished businesses, but I hope that we'll be able to talk about it later. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tomasz, and thank you for sharing with us what you consider being the main outcome of this COP19 conference in Warsaw, which, as a reminder, took place last November. So now I'm giving the floor to Artur for some opening statements. He will give us the Commission perspective on this. Thank you, Artur.
No, I think I just have to compliment of what Tomasz was saying. Also from the Commission side, we see Warsaw as a successful COP. I think that is despite the fact what many people read in the newspapers and in the media. And also I think there was big reports about the NGOs walking out at a certain stage. I think that shows more or less the impatience of the general public. They want to see things happening on international climate negotiations. And they think it's going far too slow. Of course, we as negotiators very often have that same kind of sense that things should move faster. But in the end, we are sitting there with 195 parties. and we will have to accomplish consensus. And that is not an easy thing when you talk about a problem that is going to affect every part of the economy, every part of the society, if we want to solve it in an effective manner. Let me comment on three things, I think, that are very important with respect to the Warsaw outcome. And that is particularly related to the outcome in Paris everybody is expecting in the year 2015. In that respect, Warsaw achieved and accomplished some very important things. And number one is really that everybody is going home from Warsaw knowing that, yes, we will have to do more work, we will have to intensify our negotiations, but we also have to intensify our domestic preparations. How can we come to an agreement in Paris if we don't know what the individual countries are going to contribute in the fight against climate change? And there an important deadline was set in Warsaw saying, you parties go home, consult your constituencies, consult your parliaments, and come with a negotiating mandate at the beginning of 2015, where you can clearly say what you will be able to contribute. And then we have a year time, or 9 to 10 months time, until we meet again in Paris in order to conclude the final deal. That was a very important signal to everybody around the table, because we know, even in Europe, how difficult it is to come to such a mandate. As I said, it affects all the economy, all the society, so you need to consult very extensively and very widely if you want to move forward. That is one thing. The second thing that was important, and that was also reported always in the newspapers, is, yeah, there's this ambition gap. Until the year 2020, we are not really on track to stay below 2 degrees Celsius. The World Bank is even coming out with reports saying, if we continue like this, we will move into a 4 degrees world. And the scientists tell us it is going to be very hard to manage a 4 degrees world. Even they don't give us any certainty that we would be able to do that. So also there, the COP in Warsaw has accomplished something in saying we must make sure that the mitigation potential, the potential to reduce further emissions before 2020 is going to be explored and exploited as much as possible. And we will have this year meetings of technical experts to look particularly at these areas of high mitigation potential. That can be in the field of renewables, in the field of energy efficiency, reducing deforestation, and it should end up with very practical initiatives that are going to be taken on top of all the commitments that all the parties have been making over the last years. So I think that is a second very, very important outcome on our way towards Paris. At the moment, I would say that we are still on track, because that's a question I often get. Are we going to end up in something like Copenhagen? I think we are set up much better than ahead of Copenhagen. The process, we will have more time, still 2 years to go. And I think in terms of preparatory process, it's much better set up than before. And Warsaw was able to contribute to that in a big way.
Thank you very much, Artur, for explaining the Commission perspective. So if I understand you both well, you are quite optimistic about the next steps and mainly the meetings in Lima and in Paris. So do you consider that as roughly it's 18 months between Warsaw and Paris? Do you think it's enough? And I know, Artur, you said that the setup is much better than before Copenhagen, so we shouldn't leave a second major failure like in Copenhagen. So are you fairly optimistic about these two meetings and also this deadline of the Paris meeting?
Well, just to answer shortly, yes, At least I am optimistic. But it's always bad. The first but is that we don't have 18 months. We have at the best 12 to 13 months from now, because of the rule of the convention that requests any changes, any new protocols, any legally binding documents to be presented to parties 6 months before the meeting in all UN languages. So the translated, and for translation only the edited draft, legal draft could be sent. The translated version of the Paris Agreement, of draft Paris Agreement, would need to be sent to parties not later than by the end of May next year.
Okay.
It means that it has to be released by parties, by all 195 parties to the convention. End of March, beginning of April next year at the latest. Then we have this period between making public, making it available for parties, and Paris COP in the beginning of December 2015 for the discussion, for clarification, for some adjustments, etc., etc. But we are still optimistic. Why? First, because we are aware of these constraints. So it's not just optimism that is a result of enthusiasm, but this is the optimism that comes out from the very well thought plan that has been drafted in Warsaw, and which is just the continuation of what was initiated in Durban. So that's important, that we are not deviating from this road that was initiated in Durban. This is very important. I think that also the discussion between countries which have sometimes completely different interests, that have completely different political and constitutional systems, that have very different historical experience. This discussion is aiming into one direction. So that's another element that we need to allocate as a supporting element. This year we have to draft the agreement. As a matter of fact, before Lima and in Lima, we need to draft the, I would say, I don't know if Artur would share this view, between 85 to 95% of agreement, just to leave final 10 to 5% for adjustments in the beginning of 2015, and just to be able to follow the timetable which is requested. I'm optimistic because it's also a lot of political support on the level of ministers. The ministers talk to each other. The ministers very often take the decisions that guide the negotiators. So this link between what the negotiators do and what the ministers are discussing is much better now than it was before Copenhagen.
Okay.
So as we are usually comparing Paris with Copenhagen, I think it's not only much milder climate in Paris, but it's also much better communication now, and we are aware of the mistakes that were done.
Okay. Artur, do you want to react to that?
No, just to say, I also think that this is doable until Paris. Everybody knows the challenge, and I also think that there is an increasing political willingness around the world to have a substantive outcome from Paris. And I think good examples are, it's not only the European Union and the leaders in Europe that are going around trying to talk to other countries about climate change, but it's also the United States, for instance, where climate change is very high on the agenda. Secretary of State Kerry is going around talking to all his contacts about climate change. I think there's a similar awareness in the leadership of China that something needs to be done on climate change. Countries are becoming more and more aware that this is a problem, that this is happening today, and the window of opportunities for changing the track and the trajectory is between now and the years 2030, 2040, 2050. But the decisions will have to be taken in this decade. That cannot wait longer. So that makes me optimistic. I think some of that commitment we saw in Warsaw. You will have seen the pictures of countries standing in the corner, haggling over the text, trying to find a solution until Saturday afternoon. And I think that kind of energy in these little huddles shows exactly that the political will is there to move forward. So I'm very optimistic for this year that we will be able to accomplish this, bringing together a text onto the table by Lima. That is certainly the task that all the countries have set themselves to move forward and have this on the table and discuss it in Lima.
Okay.
If I may,
yes.
just one sentence. I think what is new, really, and really encouraging, is that it is quite visible that everybody understands that climate problem cannot be solved by one country, one group of countries, that this is our common responsibility. We need to differentiate the way we make it happen in our countries, but we need to agree all in order to solve the problem. And this understanding is there already.
Okay, thank you. Going back to Artur, regarding the role of the European Union, does the EU have a special role in these international climate negotiations? Because we often read that the EU has a tendency to take a certain leadership, also being ambitious in Europe by setting ambitious targets. So does the EU play a special role? Or if we compare also to the weight of the United States or other global players like China and India?
Yes, it is true that the EU has a particular role in these climate negotiations. And I think you will only understand that if you go back 10, 15 years and look at the state of the climate negotiations at that time. One of the main undercurrents in the argumentation was always, okay, you can grow your economy or you can fight climate change. And it was a debate as if, okay, you can fight poverty and eradicate poverty, or you can fight climate change. And I think it was very important for the EU to show in a convincing manner, in practice, that you can grow your economy and at the same time you can reduce your emissions. Since 1990, European emissions have gone down by almost 19%, and the economy has been growing by more than 40%. And I think that is the convincing example that tells developing countries it's not either or. We have to see these things together. And that kind of practical leadership, leading by example, is very important. And it's really the proof of the pudding is in the eating. That is what I often say in the negotiations, and that is where the EU has a very important role to play and to continue to play.
Okay, thank you. Just reacting to your last comment, actually, because actually it's the whole purpose of this Climate for Growth campaign is finding solutions actually to combine ambitious climate change policies and at the same time fostering competitiveness and growth and ultimately creating jobs in Europe. And there is more and more criticism around this, that basically the EU is setting itself ambitious targets, but at the same time this shooting itself in the foot, because then it has an impact on the competitiveness of European industries. Actually, while we see that in other parts of the world, because they are still also in a developing phase, if I can say, they are not so much ambitious when it comes to fighting climate change. So, can you react on this?
Well, I think Tomasz mentioned it before. Of course, as EU, we do not assume that we lead and that we then win the battle against climate change. Our emissions are far too small as a share of the global emissions. The only thing we can do is we can show how it can be done. But we have to be very wary about if we would go it completely alone and we would be totally isolated, then of course this would not work. Because in the end, we will have to get down global emissions and not just the European Union emissions. And a policy in Europe that would lead to the relocation of emissions from Europe to other parts of the world would also not work. So that is not in the interest of the European Union. And I think we have been very clear on that in our policy packages in Europe, shielding those industries that are particularly exposed to international competition and where carbon leakage could happen. Particularly under the EU emissions trading system, we deal with that in, I think, a very effective manner. That is at least what our studies are showing. And I think that is also part of, and must be part of, the debate internationally. This whole issue around carbon leakage, that is not going to be helpful. That is undermining the efficiency of global climate policies. So this is a particular area where we will have to find a solution, and the solution can only be in moving forward together. And therefore we will have to do this in a multilateral context under the United Nations.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Tomasz, you want to react?
Maybe to complement what Artur has just said. I think it's very important what we managed to initiate in Warsaw, but it's not started in Warsaw. It not started in Warsaw. We managed to initiate the inclusion to the negotiating process. The role of so-called non-state actors. It is very important that the leadership comes not just from group of countries, but the leadership comes from good examples that would be followed. So it's the question how we measure leadership, with the ambition of the goal or with a number of followers. I think that the role that cities, subnational authorities might play would be exactly in building the group of followers that would implement best practices in providing sustainable transport system, in providing good infrastructure that is energy efficient, in developing some people call it soft measures, soft policies that are the result of changes in organization of life in the cities. The businesses are developing new technologies. The businesses are developing new products that help to reduce the emissions, help to reduce the energy consumption. So it is very important that as the process leading to Paris develops, we also develop as wide as possible a group of followers, that it is not just the responsibility of governments, but it is also the duty of each of us.
Okay, thank you. I'm going back to Artur actually, and I want to ask about the 2030 package that's been released by the Commission very recently. So new targets for 2030 to be achieved by the 28 member states of the European Union. Is this not, I mean, we can read in the media that this could potentially undermine let's say the flexibility of the European Union to negotiate in Paris by imposing itself quite ambitious targets. I would like to hear what you think about that, actually.
I think that would be misreading a little bit in terms of what the Commission was proposing. I think, first of all, the proposal is there in order to get the debate going in Europe in terms of where we need to head to. We have set ourselves already a long-term objective in the EU to reduce our emissions by 80 to 95% by the year 2050. What this proposal does is trying to be more concrete and specific what types of policies you would have to pursue in order to reach that long-term goal, which would mean, yes, you would have to reduce your emissions in Europe by 40% by the year 2030. And the proposal tries to figure out what is a cost-efficient, a cost-effective way forward. And again, it's in the same spirit of what we have been doing in the past, growing our economy on one side and decoupling emissions from that. If you look at the growth forecast until 2030, in 2030, kind of the proposal that's on the table says that the Europeans will be twice as rich as in 1990. So when I said today it's plus 40%, then we will continue to grow as EU. Our citizens will become wealthier until 2030, and that means that there is more opportunities for economic activities. There is the space for economic growth. The proposition that is behind it in terms of investment is very clear. It says that we need wean ourselves off from fossil fuels, which we import very expensively from abroad, and which gives us a high dependence of our economy on these external markets. So shifting from what we pay into fuel shipping money abroad, we would invest this money in Europe, which would create jobs in the future, and it would give rise to an industrial modernization that is required if Europe wants to stay competitive even beyond the year 2020. So I think the proposal that is there looks at Europe in a much wider context. It's not just an objective to reduce emissions, but it's a blueprint for growth and employment and competitiveness at the same time, taking into account the constraints that are there because of the natural environment, because of climate change happening. So I think that is what is there. If we look at, are we tying ourselves in the negotiations? It's a Commission proposal at the moment. Certainly, if we want to negotiate in the international arena, we need to have a proposal ourselves in terms of what we are prepared to do. In the negotiations, this can be changed, upward or downward, as the negotiations go. I think that is something that we need to take into account. If Europe would not make a decision on a negotiating mandate, we would have to stay silent in the negotiations in the coming year. Because we couldn't say, even if the United States or China would turn to us and they would say, we are ready to do this, Europe, what are you ready to do? And if we have no decision, no mandate in Europe, we would have to stay silent. And I think that's the best way not to be influential in international negotiations. I think China and the US, they would just turn around and they would say, okay, then we will have to do this deal ourselves, and then we will have to see what Europe needs to do from our perspective. So I think Europe should not be in that place.
Okay, thank you. There is a... sorry, Tomasz, please.
One element. I think it's very important what Artur said about this development context. So all the discussion that we are now having in the convention is, in a matter of fact, the discussion on climate. But climate discussion must not constrain the development. It should show the way how to do it in a sustainable manner. Let me come back to the decision of Warsaw, decision of the ad hoc Durban platform working group, which was mentioned by Artur in the beginning of our conversation, which says that by end of first quarter 2015, all countries have to do their homework and tell everybody else what are the contributions they are going to put on the table in order to jointly fight the climate problem. These contributions would use different tools. They might be the contributions to mitigate emissions. They might be the contributions to better adapt to climate change. These might be technological, these might be financial, this might be in the area of capacity building. What is important is that all these contributions would need to be seen in the context of the development needs of all countries. And this is what we hear very often when we talk to the colleagues from developing countries, that they have big interest in having the emissions and the climate problem alleviated in a way that would not affect their everyday life. But they also need to develop, and they also need to find the sustainable way of matching development, emissions, energy, social needs, and of course environmental protection. So integration of all these is the most difficult part of our exercise.
Okay, thank you. Can you also share with us and with people following us on internet also your experience, Poland holding the presidency of this international climate negotiations, also because there was a lot of criticism around the COP19, and you already addressed that, and you presented the outcome of the negotiations and why according to you they are positive, and why there is reason to be optimistic for the future. But just to share, Poland, EU member state, joined the EU in 2004, so quite recently, a new player, a strong player in the EU. So
it's 10 years already.
10 years already, yeah. It's the anniversary.
Yeah, that's going to be a big celebration this year.
Yeah.
Not only because of that, it's also 25 years of restoration of our democracy.
Okay.
But coming back to your question, I think Artur, what Artur said is 100% true. The EU demonstrates how to develop and reduce the impact on the environment at the same time. And I think that the story of Polish transformation is exactly the best showcase of how to switch from the economy, which is dependent on on huge amounts of fossil fuels, economy which is dependent on heavy industry, into the economy which is still changing, but changing in the direction of modern, using the latest technologies, efficient, and creating new jobs for people who had to change their professions from time to time. But that allowed them to live in much wealthier, much better organized country. The emissions of Poland between 1988, that was the last year before transformation started, until now, reduced by 33%. And the economy is 3 times bigger. So this is the most spectacular proof that it could be done. And it could be done everywhere. It could be done everywhere. Because in every single country, when local circumstances are well taken into account, it is possible to develop the economy and develop the conditions for personal development for people in a way that is sustainable and in a way that would encourage people to contribute to this development. It is very important that in Poland the entire society accepted that this painful process of transformation, and it was very painful, you can believe me, it was very painful in the first half of the decade of 90s. Then it started to be a little bit easier. That this process is leading to something good. So if we can really demonstrate it, that will work. So that's by the way, one of the reasons why we are so optimistic.
Okay, thank you. I'm going back to Artur actually because Tomasz mentioned it. I think also it's a critical point that in this whole debate about the 2030 targets, that the Commission takes into account national specificities, national energy mix, so that the member states can clearly define what will be their clear contribution to these targets and to what extent they can contribute actually. So I think that's the philosophy also, a philosophy that is shared by the Commission.
No, very clearly. I think the framework that has been put onto the table a few weeks ago says that this needs to be accomplished in the end in a fair manner across all member states. And I think we have been highlighting in our analysis where kind of the unfair elements are at the moment. Because what the analysis is telling us that in some member states there is probably a higher potential to reduce emissions, which will require a certain amount of investments. If you then look at these investments, you will see that relative to the size of the economy or the GDP, it is a larger burden in some countries than for others. And that is a question that must be addressed when we come with the final legislative package. At the moment, what we have on the table is the rough framework in terms of what it could contain, what types of policies it could contain, but there needs to be a debate about the distributional issues across the different member states, taking into account national circumstances. And I think the Commission is looking forward to the debate among member states to clearly say what is important for them, what are the aspects, particular aspects that come from their national circumstances that need to be taken into account when we are going to prepare for the next step, which means put a legislative package onto the table which will have to include these distributional elements. If you look at the current package, we have elements in there to deal with these distributional aspects. But our open question to member states is, do you think these elements have worked or are working at the present point in time, or do you think we need to take maybe a different approach? So I think there we need an open discussion among member states and to give some guidance also back to the European Commission before we start preparing the legislative package. That is going to be an important part of the debate, and we are looking forward to that.
Okay, thank you.
I think that the only thing that could be added here is that this proposal is now in the best hands. It's in the hands of our leaders, heads of states and heads of governments, and they will need to decide how to pursue with this discussion next. And I think that's very important, that we need to very well understand what is the status of this document and what is the stage of the discussion. It's very initial stage.
Yeah. So you're clearly referring to the upcoming March Council of Heads of States. The 2030 package is on the agenda, if I'm correct. Will Heads of State also discuss the conference in Paris 2015? Or is it that too early already?
To ask heads of states.
Let's say I can't prejudge what heads of state are going to say, but I think the focus of the debate is going to be what do we want to do domestically in Europe. I think there's a very clear signal from business, from citizens, that they would wish to know which direction is the travel going to take after the year 2020. Business needs to make decisions in terms of investments, in terms of funding new research, and they would wish to know how is the climate and energy framework going to look like in the year 2030. That is certainly something that there's a big demand for it, and I think this is what heads of states need to look at. They need to look at the questions that relate to energy security in Europe, which is a big issue, that relate to the competitiveness, that relate to how to take forward the climate energy policies, and as I mentioned, very importantly, to tackle also in the first round of discussions the distributional questions that come along with it.
Okay, thank you. This year we will have European elections in May, June, so a brand new parliament. And also in the autumn, we will have a new commission, new commissioners, a new president of the commission, and also later on a new representative, high-level representative for all the foreign affairs, and also a new president. But I would like to focus more on the new commission and the new commissioners, because there are rumors that basically your DG could be merged again with merge or reintegrate DG Environment where you were initially. So, and how could this actually impact your work? But also, is it like a signal that, let's say, climate change is not anymore on top of the agenda, or what kind of signal this is sending, basically?
I think it's very hard to tell, and maybe your crystal ball is much larger than mine, because at the moment it's all speculations. Yeah. And there's many considerations when reorganizations are done in large organizations. It's not only about what is politically important, what is less important. It has also to do with streamlining the administration. We know that the Commission, like any other EU institution, is under heavy pressure in terms of staff. So where this is going to go, I think we will only know in July. And what it then means, I think, is then a second discussion that we need to have. But these rumors are being invented by the minute. And I know that many people spend a lot of time on either inventing or talking about them. I don't think it's now the time to go into speculations. What is the political meaning of all of that? Because that will really depend on who's going to be the president, what are going to be the majorities in the parliament, what are the wishes of member states, which types of portfolios would they wish to see. And merging one field with the other does not necessarily mean you weaken. It might also mean you are going to strengthen. So we will have to look at the fine print, and the fine print we will only know during the summer, or maybe only even after the summer.
Okay, so yes,
if I may
please,
add
Tomasz.
to this, because I fully agree with Artur that it's completely premature and it's pure speculation. And whatever happens, it will be decided after the election and jointly by the member states and the parliament. But this has no impact whatsoever. What would be the final setting after the election? It has no impact on what is happening in the negotiations. It has no impact on how the Paris outcome would need to be shaped, because on global level, nobody will be asking the questions unless it's just pure speculation and somebody likes rumors, you know. But there are not very many of those in the room. People will be interested in the contributions that parties would put forward by the first quarter. People would be interested in what kind of mechanisms we would be implementing in Paris and what kind of provisions this treaty, new agreement, new protocol, we don't know yet what would be the exact legal form, would take, and how this legal form would be instrumental to the purpose of this agreement, to the content, to the substance. We have in front of us very important discussion on substance, but this of the new agreement. But we must not forget that this discussion has to be supported by very careful implementation of the decisions taken so far, because this implementation is the measure of the credibility of the obligations that parties have decided to take on them before, in the process of preparation for taking new commitments, for providing new contributions, for engaging into new institutional arrangements. So far, we have to deal with quite a big tendency to fragment the institutional arrangements, both in the Convention and UN system and outside of the UN system. In the UN system, we have at least 5 or 6 agencies that could be assigned with some tasks related to climate change. We have few conventions, just Chicago Convention and Vienna Convention Geneva Convention on maritime transport, and 2 agencies, ICAO and IMO, which are very important for our considerations of what needs to be done in the future. We have to discuss how countries, how parties, how their businesses could be engaged, what kind of mechanisms would need to be introduced in order to support and enhance ambition of action. It needs to be win-win situation. We have to discuss how to differentiate within this basic principle of the Convention of Common but Differentiated Responsibility, how to differentiate between not just the annexes as we had before, as we know, which annexes reflect the split of economic strength 25 years ago. But we need to think creatively to build the mechanism that the countries would be able to graduate from where they are now to where they are hopefully will be or would be in 20, 2025, 2030. So what especially some colleagues from developing countries call the equity principle would need to be well addressed in the agreement, so we wouldn't need to go through the pain of ratification of every new change. So there is a lot of very important questions that need to be answered this year, and to answer these questions we need full engagement, not just the negotiators, but also the ministers need to be engaged. Civil society need to understand what we are doing. I think that partly the questions that are grouped around the issue of the target, how much you are going to reduce, these are the questions that, in my opinion, prove how little we were able to communicate to public opinion about what is happening in these negotiations, and how little we've been able to communicate about the development agenda, about human development as the measure of the ability of of countries, their capability to do things. So this is the huge task, and it is by far bigger than our internal discussion.
Okay, thank you very much, Tomasz. Gentlemen, I think it's time to wrap up now this interesting exchange. Any last words of wisdom from Artur or Tomasz before we end this online debate?
No, maybe just a little remark on Tomasz' last intervention. I think, of course, our debate in Europe is a small debate compared to the one internationally. But it's interesting that a lot of the topics and a lot of things we are struggling with in Europe are mirrored at the international level. And one of those is the whole issue around differentiation. Yeah. How much is every country going to contribute? And I think what we know is, and I believe also many of our friends in the developing world understand that and share that view, is that dividing the world in developed countries and developing countries only is just not going to get us where we need to be in a couple of years' time in order to save planet Earth. I think that is very clear to everybody. But the solution, we haven't found it yet, but we will find it by Paris.
Thank you.
Well, just if I just
please,
one final sentence. I think it's that it happens quite often that we fully agree with Artur. So I cannot agree more with what he said. But just to add the final period, it's to say that we need to find the win-win solution for everybody. So the solution that everybody will feel that serves the interest of the global climate, the solution that helps to prevent the changes that are harmful for everybody, because nobody is safe, nobody. But also the solution that would serve the interest of each individual country and could be explained to each individual constituency in this country, to public opinion in this country, as the solution serving their development needs.
Okay, thank you. Maybe I'll just make some concluding remarks, and then it will be time to finish that debate. So within this hour, I think some important points that we've touched upon and that you mentioned. There is clearly optimism towards what's going to be the outcome of the conference in Paris in 2015. There is political will also. We are on track to reach an agreement in 2015, and also what it's important to mention is that there is a clear roadmap until that date. Parties also, they know what they have, that they have to focus on their homework, and that they have to work on their contribution in order to be prepared for the negotiations in 2015. the EU will play a significant role also, especially in ensuring that we break through and we find a deal, if there is, of course, enough substance to find a deal. And I think that also what was clear is that it's important for Europe, but also globally, that we manage to combine ambitious climate policies and that generate growth and competitiveness. And also this time, maybe more than before, the US, they are on board. We know that there's this Obama strategy on climate change, and you also mentioned that State Secretary Kerry is touring also and talking more and more about climate change. So we all look forward to see the outcome of this COP21 conference in Paris in 2015. So Artur Runge-Metzger, Tomasz Chruszczow, thank you very much for being with us this morning. Thank you to all of you who followed us on the website of Climate for Growth. The video will be posted on our website very shortly, and we wish you all a very nice day. Thank you.
Thank you very much.